I don't care about like what the latest definition of bounce rate is or what's customer lifetime value today. It's difficult to be interested in that stuff day in, day out at your day job. And when I come back home, I want to unwind and, drink some wine and start coding the shit out of JavaScript.
That is the most nerdy thing I've ever heard, I think. But it's also amazing. Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 60th episode, we're going to talk with Simo Ahava. He's a senior data advocate at Reactor. He's hailing from Finland, and he's a Google developer expert for both Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. Now, Simo is one of my best friends in the industry and also one of my most frequently requested guests, so I think you're going to like this one. Over the years, Simo and I have bonded about our positioning and ambitions in the analytics industry, and we're part of the same cohort of bloggers who started at the end of 2012 and early 2013. Even though he's located in Finland, we've ended up running into each other in person over 10 times since we both joined the speaking circuit as well. Of course, since his humble beginnings, Simo has skyrocketed to a level of geek-internet-famous that I can't say anybody really expected, especially Simo and his Finnish self-deprecating sense of humor. It's been a blast to watch him surpass me on so many levels. Now, I still remember the first time when I shared my traffic numbers with Simo, and he was in awe that I was getting over 10,000 visitors a month. Probably a year later, he shared with me his visitor numbers, and they completely dwarfed what I was doing at Jeffalytics. Now, how did that all happen? Well, we're going to dig into details in my interview with the master. We also talk about Simo's first project and the backstory of how this all became possible. You do not want to miss this conversation with the author of the unofficial manual for Google Tag Manager. Visit jeffalytics.com/Simo for show notes. Okay, we're here today with Simo Ahava. Simo, how come I can't say your name? Simo, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
It's close enough. And thank you so much for having me. This is a dream come true for me.
I like the Finnish sensibility. Yes.
Yeah, was that too obvious?
Awesome. So thanks for joining me, Simo. The first question I like to ask everybody is, what brought you into this wild world of digital marketing or the web, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I think I've been doing comebacks throughout the years. But I think the first impetus was like 1998 or something. So I was 14 years old and I was spending the evening or sleepover at my friend's. And he had just learned about this cool language called HTML. And so we started working together and he taught me like the basics. It wasn't very difficult even then. And back then I had a huge man crush on this New York rapper called Notorious B.I.G. who had passed away the previous year. And my first site for some reason, I wanted to be a fan site to Notorious B.I.G. And so what I did was what any sensible content creator would do, which is scrape content from existing pages and pose it as your own. And I kind of created a website with images taken from other blogs and the entire text content was taken from other blogs as well. We even recorded a soundbite where we said, using the computer microphone, we recorded audio that said like, "Hi, this is Notorious B.I.G. Welcome to my website." And then we slowed it down. Slowed it down so the pitch went down and it sounded like a slightly overweight New York rapper, or so we thought. That's borderline non-politically correct at this time, but anyway, it was fun to do, and we were kids. Well, anyway, we published the site on GeoCities. I think we can have actually a Wayback Machine link in the show notes, and then some web browsers like Yahoo and AltaVista picked it up, and very soon, for whatever reason, it just started shooting up the ranks of the search engine results for Notorious B.I.G. And he was a really searched figure at that time still because he had just recently passed away, and some posthumous albums had just been released. And it ended up being like number 2 in Yahoo searches for this rapper. And I started getting lots and lots of hits. I had a stat counter running on the site and I saw that there was so many hits coming in. And I think that's when I kind of realized that I had always thought of websites as an extension of your own, like as blogs, as something that you write stuff about for yourself. And only companies and corporations and things like this had the right to create a commercial site. And even though my site wasn't commercial, I saw the commercial potential in it because so many people were coming in. And that's how I kind of realized this could be really rudimentary SEO in a way, because I turned content into something that search engines really digested. But it was also a step into the world of advertising, because I was contacted like by Source magazine, and they wanted to add a banner to the site and stuff like that. But I couldn't do it because I had lost my username and password or something ridiculous like that, and I couldn't update the website anymore. And I just let it go back then. But that also brought me really interested in analytics, because I was looking at the stat counter data and I was so dissatisfied by just looking at the number that went up. I wanted to know who these people are, where they're coming from, what they're doing. And I think that's where the journey began. And I always remember it fondly in a way, not only because of nostalgia, but also because there was such a huge rush to see so many people digesting content that you've created. Minding that I didn't create any of the content, I just put it together without giving any credit to the original authors. I apologize now, like 20 years later, but it's not like I turned into a digital marketer and just did SEO and analytics for the rest of my life. But that was kind of the first thing when I look back and see where myself and the web come together in a way.
Nice. I mean, that's amazing, because that's like such a funny time in my life too. Like that was, I think, right around the time that he died. It was like my senior year, or junior year in high school, and I just went around and bumped that music. And I think anybody would have been looking for information on him and finding stuff, and there wasn't repositories of information. So it's funny how like the web back then, yes, there were a bunch of different sites out there, but they weren't consolidated. You didn't really understand, or I didn't understand, like copyright and what to do with the content. So a lot of times,
and especially if you're a kid, I mean,
it's the site that you wanted to see that you didn't see. So you just sort of just experimented with it to see what would happen.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about web programming was that because HTML is a markup language, you don't have to worry about things like compiling and transpiling and stuff like that. All you have to do is write markup. And it's not, you're not even actually programming anything. You're just giving these kind of really superficial instructions to the browser to do something with text, formatting it in some way and adding line breaks, anything you do with like a word processor. But the difference is that when you kind of hit publish, everybody in the world can see what you did. And I think that's like an intoxicating power, even though actually it doesn't mean everybody will see it, but they have the potential to see it. And you can tell your friends, hey, visit this link, and they can actually see things that you have created. I think that the next time I got this kind of a rush was when I started doing stuff with Git, with open source stuff. So you could actually code an application and put your code online and then start seeing other people using your code to develop it further. And I think that's such an amazing thing about the open web, is that you can kind of just put stuff out there. And I think it's also part of the blogging paradigm. When you blog, you're basically writing a diary, and there's no guarantee that anybody will see it. But once they do see it and maybe even comment on your blog, it's such an amazing feeling every single time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I want to get into that, because your blog's been a really influential piece on my existence in this digital marketing world, and a lot of people digital marketers world. So we definitely have to talk about that. Yeah. But before we get to there, I have to know, what was your favorite Biggie song?
Yeah, I think my favorite is I Love the Dope, and there was the so many good tracks with that guy. I definitely just listened Life After Death cover to cover so many times, and so ridiculous. And that was the one album I owned. I mean, my dad was like really skeptical about letting me buy this stuff because it said parental advisory. He actually read that, which is interesting. At the same time, I was really into Tupac as well. So I was listening to both of these guys, and then I'm reading that these guys had like this bloody feud, and maybe they even killed each other. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I mean, these guys are so amazing. I don't want to get into that. I just want to listen to them. But is it okay if I listen to them both? Am I like breaking some gang-related rule, and now they're going to come and hit me or something? I don't know. But it was so much fun.
I love this, because this is like the internal monologue of a 14-year-old kid.
Exactly.
In too.
Yeah, and another thing that tells you about like the 14-year-old and the sensibility of how committed they are to anything is that maybe a year later, so when I was 15, going to high school in Finland, that's when I was already listening to death metal. So something just happens there, and I completely move away from one genre and get completely sucked into another one.
Yeah, well, I want, and we don't have to, the difference in cultures is interesting, because I mean, being in the U.S., I think it's a little bit more prominent. Like on TV everywhere is these videos for Tupac and Biggie, so it's sort of like everywhere, and it's on the singles charts, like the Billboard chart. So it's sort of mainstream at that point. And so, but also like I wonder like how much of it you got. Did you is it just album only, or is it like do you get the cultural references and stuff too? That's sort of funny to think about the differences between those, but that could be a whole different podcast, I guess.
Yeah, well, I can just put it. We do not get the cultural references. I didn't even understand the lyrics. I mean, I was good at English already back then, but I had no idea about the slang or the. We had this. There was this rapper's dictionary or something online, which told you like what is cream short for, all this kind of stuff. And I was always reading that while I was listening to Biggie, and I still had no idea what he was talking about, like Liberace and.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. Like most people in the U.S. don't understand it either. So it's
exactly.
Like some of these things are just so complex that I don't even get them, or I'll get them years later when I like got older. I'll figure it out. My favorite song on Life After Death, and then we'll get on to something much more practical. It's the 10 Crack Commandments. I like that one because it's actually a pretty good song for like business. We should like play that song at the end of this and talk about how relevant it is for anybody who's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a very big San Antonio Spurs fan too. So
yes.
Anybody who's a Spurs fan, if you want to talk to Simo and you want to be friends with them, don't do some like blind outreach email where you just say, "Hey Simo, I like the blog," because you get that all the time. Say, "I like the Spurs," right?
Yes. Just start with a Tim Duncan anecdote, and I'm all yours.
Awesome. All right, this is a digital marketing podcast.
Oh,
which
it
is obviously, yes. Believe it or not, we have a digital marketing podcast. But this is probably the most fun intro we've done because it's like a big part of my life, and it was a big part of your life too. So, so how do you go from this amazing teenager who's harnessing the power of the internet, basically a kingpin on the GeoCities? It's basically a force to be reckoned with. How does he become what I know as the great Simo Ahava? How does this, like, what do you do next? Like, how do you, when the world's at your fingertips and you know that you can get hundreds to thousands of people to view your site, what do you do? Do you go to school, or what do you do?
Okay, well, first of all, we're going to skip all this obvious hyperbole here and just get back down to earth. I don't know what happens. I keep doing like freelance web development. I do websites for, my student organization when I go to university, just for fun. I have like 10 different blogs over the years covering all sorts of things. I think I always just enjoy it. I never even thought it would become a profession in any way until, well, just skip to after university, because after university I was determined to become like an academic. And I have a master's degree in English philology, and I was focused on like linguistics and the syntax of language, and especially on dialects and dialectology. And I was very deep into researching that. And I have actually got an article out there, like a peer-reviewed article, which was from the time when I was still determined to write a PhD about this. And then at some point I just grew tired of having to hunt for grants and having to run after morsels of money that you might get or might not get. It wasn't really prestigious in terms of wealth, and wealth is a complete non-issue to me typically, but at the point when you've just graduated from university and you feel like you can do anything, and then you're left stuck with just barely enough to make do. It's kind of irritating, and at that point I knew that it wasn't a calling for me, because you really need a calling if you want to go into academic life. My brother was working at an IT company, a really typical kind of consultation company, and he said there's a place open there. I applied, and I was taken in as a salesperson, project manager. They did a lot of stuff on the Microsoft stack, so things like SharePoint and Visual Basic and Visual Studio became really familiar to me. And at that point, I was coming closer and closer to the web. We were doing websites and we were doing intranets, and I was kind of, this old flame was waking in me again, and I was feeling like, hey, wait a second, I remember this stuff, and I remember this paradigm. I remember what a website is. I remember like how a client, like a web browser, communicates with the web server, and this is actually really fascinating. And I'm actually getting paid to consult others about this. And then at some point in my time at this company, a friend of mine who was working as a digital marketing agency called NetBooster contacted me and said that, hey, do you know anybody who might be interested in this SEO stuff? And this is fairly recently. I mean, this is 5 years ago or something, 6 years ago, and that was the first time actually maybe that I've heard about SEO in a professional context, in like an actual profession. I haven't been following digital marketing that closely. I know what search engine optimization is, but I had never known that there was actually like a multi-billion-dollar industry around it.
Yeah, and then there's actually jobs in it or job titles.
Exactly. And you can call yourself an SEO, and that was like the weirdest thing. So I applied and I was accepted as an SEO consultant. And from there, I very soon realized that I hate SEO and I want nothing to do with it. But at the same time, I was measuring how well SEO work is doing with the client by using analytics tools. And that's when another old flame like woke in me, and I was like, hey, I remember this analytics stuff. I've been using GA on my site since Urchin, but I've never really like considered GA to be something that's the focus of all of my attention. Yep. Because, it was always just a tool that I used. I had been customizing it. I knew what custom variables were back in the classic GA days and stuff like that. I knew how the JavaScript snippet worked, but I never considered to turn it into like a complete focus of my attention. And so I started doing the analytics stuff, and very soon I was full-time analytics consultant. I had dropped SEO altogether. And that's when I come to today, or 2 years ago, when a new Finnish full stack technology service house, whatever you want to call it, I applied to them in this analytics or data advocate role, was accepted, and that's where I am now. So I work at Reactor as a full-time analytics consultant. It's been a weird journey. I mean, there's been some paths that in retrospect I think might not have contributed at all to where I am now, but maybe that tells more that I might not be yet where I want to be ultimately. For example, my whole time in university I was spent researching theoretical syntax and languages and stuff like that. And no, I don't use those skills at the moment, but who knows what will happen in 5 years or 10 years. So I don't think like I found my calling. I just feel like I'm right now doing exactly what I'm meant to do at this moment in terms of like where my skills are and what my passion is.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's actually really interesting because to hear it from your perspective, because I think a lot of us probably assumed that you were in this longer and that you had this long path to expertise, and then you decided to publish it and share it on your blog. But it seems like in the timeline, if I'm correct, you basically took this job, started a blog, and then became what I know not too long after that. It seems like it was pretty quick rise from when you learned how to do these things. Obviously, even you just said like you knew how to configure Google Analytics beyond a beginner level. You knew that there was code you could put on the site to segment your visitors. You knew that there was these things you could do, but you weren't like Simo Ahava that we know today when it was happening.
Yeah, I think the big revelation was not in terms of GA, but in terms of like how you can use JavaScript to enhance web analytics. I think that was the big revelation. I think that's kind of actually the undercurrent of the blog. I mean, it's a digital analytics blog, and I write about analytics stuff. But what I feel like it is actually is a JavaScript blog for people who are interested in configuring their analytics with a more complex level, and because JavaScript is necessary for that. It's taken some twists and turns. I mean, there's stuff about mobile analytics as well, which is not JavaScript related, more about general programming stuff. So the blog started in May 2013, if I remember correctly, and it started as an SEO blog. So I was writing about a really crappy articles, like really bad articles about SEO, like the typical stuff, content is king bullshit, what everybody wrote at that time. And then the whole thing kind of erupted when one of my colleagues asked me that one of his clients had been wondering if there's a way to kind of track what the weather is like when you're visiting a website. And the idea was that, they have a golf resort or something, and they want to know, does the weather forecast for the next weekend impact how people are booking green fees for the course? And if there was an impact, could they do something preemptively, like push simulator golf or saunas or the country club or something, or country club services? And that was like a really interesting question. And I thought that, you can already get you can already geolocate users with JavaScript. That's easy. You can use that geolocation data to pull weather data from an open API. That's relatively easy. And you can send information to GA with JavaScript. And by kind of combining these three, you can actually start measuring what the weather was like when the user visited a website. And I wrote this into a blog article in October or something in 2013, and like Google Analytics shared it. The Google Analytics official social media channel shared it, and suddenly I saw this incredible spike in analytics. That's what GA shares do for you. But like this incredible spike in that data, and that was like the first time I tasted the good stuff. And I was like, I want this to happen again and again and again. And so I started writing more and more. And the one thing that I noticed, having read so much stuff about SEO and having helped so many clients with SEO stuff and doing all this technical stuff and link building and things like this, I never did anything like that to my site. The only thing I did was I just pushed content out. I never considered things like keywords or what people are searching for. I never considered, information architecture. Never considered avoiding having too many different topics in a single. I just wrote whatever I felt was important. And I just made sure I published at least one article per week, which was easy because this was like code. This was some technical solutions. All you had to do was like write a couple of lines of code and some description around it, and you had a blog article. And I just made sure I did that deliberately, and it's been like a hockey stick curve ever since that. It's plateaued in this year because I haven't been writing anymore, or very infrequently, but still, I mean, it was just so amazing, and that's like why I fell in love with analytics again, is just to see it's such a incredible real-time feedback for your own content, to see other people digesting it and keep on digesting it even after the first share.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's cool. I mean, obviously you and I, we started our blogs. I maybe it was 6 months before you, but we started to get a little bit more, get noticed around the same time. I think I probably noticed you because of that Google Analytics share that they shared it out, and then let's see, October you put that article out there, and then I remember you and I met at Super Week. I had just gotten off the stage, and you came up to me, and I looked at your thing. I was like, "You're Simo. You're the weather guy, you're the guy who wrote the weather post."
Yeah, and I was like, "You're Jeff. You're the periodic table guy." So we both had this. Yeah. We both had this one piece of content that everybody knew, or many people knew.
We were both one-trick ponies then and now.
Exactly. Yeah, hilarious.
But so then we started hanging out and everything like that. But then, I remember you went up there and did the golden punch card thing, and you shared that article. Basically, you just sort of summarized it, and you put together like a whole presentation on it, and you won the thing. And then the next year, you're a featured speaker, and obviously it's been going crazy ever since then. But it seems like that was basically, you're right. I like what you're saying about never having a plan to try, you're not doing this for traffic. Yeah. I mean, obviously traffic is important, and it's fun to look at analytics, and you look at it, and then it informs what you do next. You're not doing it for the glory. It's more like basically these are the problems you're solving, or these are the things that are interesting to you. And it turns out that they're interesting to a lot of people as well. Yeah,
I think this kind of brings us back to the wealth thing, because I mean, I've made a conscious decision not to monetize the blog, and I'm very proud of that. I pay everything out of my own pocket, and there's no donations or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And the costs are ridiculously low. So it's not like a question of money, because I mean, obviously I could add ads there and maybe some premium content if I wanted to, and it would probably be quite easy to make a buck with it. Maybe even put some freelance consultation services out there. I don't have a mailing list either. People keep asking for it. I don't want to do it because that feels like I owe it to the people who are subscribed on the list to bring them content. I don't want to owe anybody anything. I just want to write stuff, and on my own pace. I mean, you can already grab the RSS feed if you're really interested in getting live notifications. But to say that it would be just about putting content out there is a bit hypocritical. I mean, obviously there's stroking the ego when you look at the data, when you look at how many people are looking for it and reading it and commenting on it and talking about me and inviting me to conferences. Obviously that feels like ridiculously good. And I'm so incredibly thankful to people who comment on the blog. I think that's still maybe in order of preference, if somebody shares your post with a comment, that's really, really cool. If somebody comments on your blog with a really insightful message, that's top of the heap. Anybody who does that is a king or a queen in my eyes. I worship them. It's such an amazing thing to get really thoughtful responses to content you create. And then there's things like retweets and likes and shares, which are kind of inconsequential. But the fact that people kind of take content and build a dialogue around it and do it for your content, that's just so amazing. I just can't replicate that feeling anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. And I guess I don't really comment on your blog because you publish stuff and then I don't need it at the time, or I don't know if I need it, and then I like 6 months later I'm like, oh yeah, Simo wrote about that, and then I'll have a question and I just email you directly because because I don't know, I'm just like, man, this is so good, but it's so nuanced. That's got to be a tough thing when you're writing this, is like to anticipate people's questions, because you write very detailed, it's very succinct, it's very clear what you write, but even then the permutations of a piece of code or a situation, and then also you're dealing with people's installs, some of them being good, some of them being standard, naming conventions and everything. It's got to be really difficult to like anticipate everybody's. Is that a consideration when you do this? Do you write it? Who do you write for when you write these things?
I don't know. I think I write for the empty chair. There's no persona in my mind when I write for it. I don't write for myself. I don't see any benefit in that. I started off recording my own ideas for prosperity, just so that I can come back to them and replicate them. But at this moment, I don't know who I write for. I definitely write for a technical audience. I've never wanted to write a beginner's guide to GTM, for example. That's not my guide to write. I don't think I would have the patience to start going over stuff on that kind of a level. I think I write for a technical audience, and I don't anticipate questions, because one of the beautiful things about the blog, which has completely organically happened, is that people send so many comments. And I have I think it's the blog post on form tracking, which tells you different ways to track your form. There's like 200 comments on that. And they are so insightful. So the actual content happens in those comments. The blog post only gives you the kind of skeletal code around it, but people give their own ideas and their own implementations, and they take these things and mutate them and come back with solutions. And many people have said afterwards that, it's the text is okay, the blogs are interesting, but the comments is where the magic happens. And now I'm kind of concerned that when I move to Disqus and Cloudflare, I'm not sure if the comments are being indexed anymore. I don't see any. I haven't tested it recently, but that would definitely be a shame, because way back then, when the comments were indexed as text content, it was another way to get like more traffic as well. But definitely the comment section is just beautiful stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think yours is a lot more active than others. And it's funny, I think a lot of comment sections are pretty dead, but it seems like if you have a loyal audience, and then when it's something that's, it's not controversial, but something that could be debated, that's where a lot of the good comments come in. Or when you're, like you said, when you're creating something, that's when this conversations start to happen. I've been on a deep dive lately into like WordPress themes and WordPress plugins, and I see a lot of comments on those types of things, because it's just there's so many different varied ways that something can happen. So it's like the questions and the debates versus like if you just write how to do if you write a case study or something, it's hard to comment other than to say, wow, that's cool. Well, and I'm curious, like one of the questions I have, because I actually pulled your site up for May 2013 in the Wayback Machine. Do you know what your first post was about?
It was search trends and what they reveal.
Yes. It was about how much you love Google Trends.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was top 5 features of modern CMSs. Third one was about content strategy. So I only bring this up because when you and I first met, you wanted a multi-purpose blog. I think we both sort of wanted multi-purpose blogs. Yeah. Like mine was like, I'm just going to write about whatever I'm doing. Like if I'm doing something with WordPress, I'll write about that. If I'm doing an analytics consulting project and something's interesting, or if I can add value, I'll do that. Or if, PPC, whatever I'm doing in my projects, I would just sort of write about it back when I actually wrote. And I think you were the same way. But then, at what point did you decide, or why did you decide to specialize? Because you say you're an analytics blog. I almost think of you as like the Google Tag Manager blog, and then Google Tag Manager sort of supports analytics.
First of all, Google Analytics blog, maybe not even digital analytics. Like I said, I think it's a JavaScript blog, but I don't want to take credit for that, because I'm still learning JavaScript. It's a lifelong journey. I want to think of it like maybe a blog for developer-oriented blog for web analytics. Maybe that's like the closest thing I can come up with when I think about what ties in my recent articles. But there's some personal stuff there as well. There's things about digital marketing I still do. I have one actually in the pipeline now that I hope will stir some controversy. At some point, I just realized that first of all, I don't care about SEO at all, and I don't want to write about it. And maybe a bit hyperbole. I mean, obviously SEO is something, it's really interesting, and there's some technical SEO stuff that I'm really into, but I don't want to be in any way affiliated with an SEO blog. I don't want people to think like that. And then I think at some point I turned it into a digital analytics blog. Like the idea was talking about the new trends in digital analytics, at which point I realized that I'm way too lazy to ever know what the current trends are in digital analytics. I read a lot, but once I'm done with my workday, I couldn't care less about like industry stuff. I don't care about my industry enough to be that interested in it. I read a lot about like what my friends are writing and developer. I read a lot about JavaScript and stuff like that. But I don't care about like what the latest definition of bounce rate is, or what its impact is on our industry, or what is customer lifetime value today. I don't.
Or how do you set up goals, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to kind of be interested in that stuff because you go through the motions day in, day out at your day job. And when I come back home, I want to unwind and, drink some wine and start coding the shit out of JavaScript.
That is the most nerdy thing I've ever heard, I think. But it's also amazing.
It's ridiculous.
And I mean, honestly, imagine a world where part of the whole point of this podcast is for people to learn what lane they can pick and how they can do things by deconstructing people who have arrived. And I know you're much too modest to say you've arrived, but I'm going to say it. You're Simo Ahava. You're like a household name now in some of the nerdiest households in the world.
Okay.
But imagine a world if Simo Ahava would have not specialized. What would who would be our resource for Google Tag Manager? What would we use to find things? How would we be if you would have just kept on, once a week writing about a random topic as opposed to getting specialized?
Yeah, but I think you're right in a way. I do play the thought game every now and then of what if I'd never just started blogging this stuff? I mean, maybe I would be very content being just a regular developer working on this stuff. Because one of the things that's over the last maybe a year and a half that's been really kind of pressuring me and putting me in a sort of a bad place is, conferences is one thing. And maybe we can have a quick chat about conferences after this bit. But conferences is one thing. They've just put a lot of pressure on me, and I've had to rethink my approach. And the other thing is that I've kind of made it clear that I'm very open to giving support and helping others. Mm-hmm. And I spend a ridiculous amount of time in the Google product forums and Google Plus, responding. I almost feel like I'm a customer support person for Google because I do so much. I have no reason for it. I think it's, again, something to do with ego stroking because I like seeing people benefit from my help. And I do a lot of it. I almost compete with myself. I feel like I have to be the first one and the only person who responds to these requests. It's a weird thing. I have no explanation for it. But I've put it out there that I am this kind of a person, and I'm happy to help, and I accept no money for compensation. So I get like hundreds of emails a week for people asking for help. And I just started maybe a year and a half ago, just started deliberately ignoring them. So if you send me email and figure out why I'm not responding, it's because there's just too much of it. And if you want my help, your best bet is to go to those product forums and have my response help others as well. I think it's kind of selfish to ask for help via email if you have a question that others could benefit from as well. I think that's my approach. I want my help to scale because there's so little time to give it. Yeah. So I want if I spend my time helping others on my own time, my own free time that's away from my family, I want it to be beneficial for the community as a whole. So that's been kind of the part why I've started thinking, what if I never did this blog? Like, how much happier would I be now? How much less pressure would there be on me? I would just be like a regular dude developing stuff, hanging out with my family, traveling to, maybe going even to conferences where I'd now be a speaker, maybe going there as a participant, just attendee and listening to stuff. I think it's a really nice thought experiment. I calm myself when I think of that world. And then I think about all the wonderful people I've met and all the opportunities that have come to me through this hard work on the blog and the support forums. And I think, like, obviously I wouldn't probably change a thing, but it's still funny that there's no money involved. It's not like my livelihood is on the line, and I'm still feeling pressured by the commercial realities of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you and I have talked about this over beers before, and we have to have beers again soon.
Yeah, we do.
But my primary occupation is involved with like, I don't have anybody paying me to do anything, right? I don't have a job. I don't clock in. So basically the blog and other means are ultimately how I have to end up getting along and doing things. And so there's, in my case, there are needs to monetize things and everything. It's just a necessary piece of this whole business. And it is for a lot of people, but usually people, I think anybody starting to get into this thing to say, I want to make money, is maybe 1 out of every 1,000 of them is going to make money off of it. Yeah. But I think people who start saying, I'm going to do this because and actually you told me this many times, is that like you started your blog and you do this because you benefited so much from other people that this is your way of paying it forward in a way.
That is absolutely true. And I know that other people feel the same way, and I wish people would kind of more regularly just come out and say it, because I think it's so important for content creators to hear how useful their stuff has been to others. And I mean, obviously people say thank you for the content all the time, but what I would love to hear, because I every now and then I get this amazing email from someone who says that, 3 years ago I asked you this. Do you remember? Obviously I don't have a very good memory, so I don't remember, but I go through my emails. I go through my emails and I found the mail and I say, yeah, I remember. I gave you this answer and helped you along. And then he's like, or she's like, ever since that, I've been so inspired by what you put out there that I've gone through. I started as a junior analyst. Now I'm a senior partner in some digital marketing consultancy firm. And even though it's again like ego stroking to tell me that I would have a big part in that, the very fact that they say this is just an amazing feedback for any kind of content you create. It's for sure. It could be a photograph that you post online, or a poem, or a fan fiction, or a Notorious B.I.G. website. But when somebody comes to you and tells you that what you did has kind of shaped me and my career, it's amazing feedback. And I think that's what I've told you, and that's what I've told others as well, is that when I started in digital marketing, for example, like the Moz blog, your blog, Google Analytics blog, all these people writing stuff. Not only content-wise, the content was amazing, but also the fact that people are writing stuff and not asking for money to read it. That was like revelatory. I always had the feeling that, especially in the US, and this is stereotypical, I think, but especially in the US, like many companies have this amazing content and they put it out there, but they put it behind a paywall or something, or you have to pay premium to get it. And that's why I'm so excited to see companies like Lunametrics and Analytics Pros and Seer Interactive and all these big analytics companies just doing so much more outreach every passing year. I think they do so much more now than they did 3 years ago, and I think that's such a wonderful trend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that it's like the only way to go, right? If you want to, like, there's so much benefit that comes out of it. Yeah. But I have to address something. It almost said like that you wrote Notorious B.I.G. fan fiction, but I think there was a comma there.
I will admit to nothing.
No, I think that, we should write some Notorious B.I.G. fan fiction. Anybody who's listening, that's like our next blog idea, right? Yeah,
I want to write one where he kind of makes amends with Tupac, and it turns out they were best friends all along, and the whole kind of double murder was just staged or something.
I like it. They both become undercover buddy cops.
And
they basically become the
I think we need a Star Trek crossover at this point, because no fan fiction survives for long enough without a Star Trek crossover.
I like it. So, but going back to the reason why we do this, like, I think, you want to start out with an intent that a belief that the market's either being underserved or that you can do something that is unique. That's like a prerequisite to this thing, or you just want to like get noticed, or you're debating with stuff internally, and that has to start from a pure perspective. But I think it's okay, and actually, I mean, it's an interesting question that if you wouldn't have specialized, then you'd probably have stagnated, and I don't know if you'd have gotten such a big following if you did specialize. But what if you didn't specialize too much and you could still add value. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. But I think the ones who are successful are the ones who did something. You know, it's like if it comes down to sitting on the sidelines and waiting for the perfect time to start versus just doing it and seeing what happens. I mean, you said that you had I think you said 10 different websites between the Notorious B.I.G. one and Simo Ahava.
Yeah.
And then you probably had 100 or probably 30 or 40 posts before one hit, quote unquote.
Yeah. Something like that.
And so it's funny, like earlier I was like, man, you sort of were an overnight success, having not been in analytics hardcore or called yourself an analytics person until like 4 months or 5 months before the big blog post hit, the weather one. But it's not true at all, right? So it's like, it's sort of funny how it goes. It's like, it seems like it's one way, but it really isn't. There's so much stuff going on behind the scenes to make something like that happen.
And the timeline is always warped. I mean, so if I put the article out in October and got the major traffic then, it still doesn't translate to constant success. Like we know from SEO that, you know, you can have a peak in your traffic and it doesn't translate to anything unless you can turn it into a curve. And I think that when I started getting those conference invitations, I think that's when I realized that, hey, wait a second, I don't have to actually apply for a conference, but people want me to come and speak. Because I was in academia before, and I remember the rigorous procedure of getting to do a conference talk. You had to put like a article in, and they had to analyze it, and they maybe send it back and ask for revisions or something. And now people are actually inviting me to conferences where people pay hundreds of euros or dollars to attend. I think that was the time. When I started realizing that, wait a second, I might be onto something here, and maybe this is. This is interesting. This is very interesting. Why are people so interested in what I have to say? But the specialization thing, one thing that's unique, I think one thing that's unique about this whole origin story is that I started writing about web analytics development about a year after Google Tag Manager had come out. And Google Tag Manager is really interesting because it sits firmly in the interface between like tech developers and then these kind of very newbie web digital people. And it sits firmly there. You can use it without knowing a line of code, or you can use it really efficiently if you're like a superstar JavaScript developer. So I think the thing that happened was that nobody was really writing about accessible stuff that you can use to customize your analytics implementation. And GTM, nobody was really writing about GTM either, that much at least. So I think that's the thing that happened, is that I found a niche that suddenly catered to so many different publics. And the number of these groups are just growing. Like when Google introduced JavaScript crawling to their search engine algorithm, suddenly you could use GTM to update your website metadata. And again, a new crowd is found. You have the SEO crowd now reading your blog. Then you have the
SEO crowd's like in love with you. You're like, they're like, who's this guy?
There's so many of them. It's crazy. Yeah. So I think it's very difficult to replicate what I did because these niches are just coming fewer and fewer. It's so hard to find something like Google Tag Manager or tag management that so easily transcends all these different professions and all these different skill levels. But maybe with AI and ML, when they become more accessible, maybe there's things to be done over there as well. Who knows?
Well, actually, I think I agree with you that what you're doing right now, it was right place, right time. Yeah. There's an absence or a void of actual leadership in the area, especially a void of leadership from Google. It's my words, not yours, so you can't get in trouble with them. But you wrote the manual that was missing to Google Tag Manager. That's sort of how I look at it, is like everybody wishes there was a manual to read, and you were the closest thing to it, and you still are. I mean, there's maybe some number twos, but they're a pretty distant number two as far as breadth of catalog. But there's other areas that you think about that are like a black box when people are looking for it. Like I think maybe we just don't notice it because we might not deal with those things every day. But, things like being the person who talks the most about what's going on in the world of Facebook and like visibility of Facebook to what you're, visibility, analytics, that type of stuff. And then how do you customize it? How do you get the most out of it? I think the reason why that niche hasn't arrived is because there's nobody who is doing it yet. Or maybe there is, and I just am not plugged into that community. But I think that there's a lot of like learning from what you did, which is basically writing the manual that somebody else that the big technology company should have written. Actually, if anybody listening to this ends up starting to do that, you're going to be successful. You're going to have to turn down all the opportunities. And if they wanted to monetize it, there's a lot of opportunities to do that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true. I think the thing is that it was Google that put out the tag management solution. Obviously, TMSs have been around for longer, but it was Google, so you knew that you could kind of ride their wake. Even though they've had bad product launches and you've seen failures. Wave, anyone? But GTM was, you knew right from the start that it's going to be big because it really did something for GA, which was already like the biggest analytics platform in the world. It made it easier to customize it. So it opened this entire new world for that. And I think that's what happened. But the thing about niches is that they're niches because we don't know enough about the context. So obviously there are all these things out there that haven't yet been discovered, which are just waiting for someone or a group of people to start writing content for, and then they'll do the same thing. They'll be the pioneers in that and be able to build a following just by being first and putting content out there. So I think that's, and again, I emphasize I was definitely not the first to do this. There was lots of great content out there already, but maybe it's just the fact that I was so determined to just put so much stuff out there to start with. And I have a very curious mind that I had all these questions in my mind and I wanted to answer those questions. So I think that's what happened. It wasn't just fluff about like GTM is a beautiful tool, blah, blah, blah. But it was actually like, how does GTM work? How does it work under the hood?
Yeah. Well, and I think the momentum has to be there too, because I mean, it's interesting because I have my analytics course and I have the forums and I get probably 5 to 10 questions a week that are all pretty unique, and I answer them, and I'll try to find an article to share with them, and if I can't find one, then I'll just write the response. And like 80% of the time, there's not really a good article about that response. And if I just simply turn that into content, if I just turn those into articles, I'd have 2 articles a week, and I would have the Simo Ahava of Google Analytics. I'd have the missing practical user end guide to Google Analytics. But I didn't do it. I don't do it, and I'm probably not going to do it because I make excuses. There's a million reasons why I don't. I have my hands in other places. I'm working on other stuff. Yeah. You did it. Like, that's the big difference, I think, is like, yes, it's not replaceable because it's not only a good idea. A good idea doesn't really mean anything. It's that you did it. And that's the most important thing. And then you're driven to do it. I mean, you have 60 GTM tips. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's basically one tip a week. I remember when you first started doing it, I was like, I wonder how long this is going to last. He's going to run out of them. Just like when I started doing my podcast, you're like, hey, Jeff, you're never going to make it to 100 episodes. Yeah. I still use that as like you're on my dartboard, Simo's picture, and like, I'm going to make it to 100 Simo. Yeah.
You're right. No, that's true.
But anyway, that's true. I mean, a lot of it comes down to execution as well. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is. And definitely it's a snowball effect. So once you start building a following, things start happening by themselves. I mean, people are sharing it and then they amplify it. And I think you even get a pass for really bad content at this point. I mean, I've had some articles that I'm not proud of and they've had like coding errors and stuff like that. And still nobody cares. They still content and that, which kind of leads me to think, do people actually read that content? Because they still thank me for the content, even though it's absolute crap. But I think at this point I get a pass, and I really just now I'm kind of trying to find the inspiration to write again. I've started writing a bit more now again. But the fact is that unless Google Tag Manager comes up with a big product release soon, I'm kind of starting for content. I have some ideas how to come up with new lines of content, which I don't want to share yet, but. They might work or might not work, but still the idea. I think I just want to. It's so important to just write and just put content out there. And you can write like really short stuff. Like if you've ever read Seth Godin's blog, like his articles are short. They're just like they're anecdotes, they're aphorisms, they're things that come to his mind, and he writes about them. And they're just a couple of paragraphs long, and that's all it takes. All you need is something that's easily digestible. You don't have to write like a huge manual every single time, even though there's a calling for that as well. There's a demand for manuals as well, or like really in-depth stuff like people like Thomas Backdahl writes. That's like amazing content, but you can also get by with something less ambitious. And the other thing I think,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the other thing I think that is really important is to not stop just being to keep going further, not be just a content creator, but actually someone who talks about that content, which is why, social media is so important. You put content out there and that starts a dialogue, which you can continue in Twitter or Google Plus or Facebook or even in the blog comments or in conferences. The idea is that the content itself is just the icebreaker for the conversation. The conversation starts where the last line of the content ends, and that's huge for amplifying the content itself.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that it makes it more meaningful to keep on doing it too when it becomes real.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things is if you spend a lot of time creating content, if the amplification is zero and the response is zero, then it's not likely to keep on doing it. But if you can hear responses and people challenge things and you can make edits, like you had said just a few minutes ago, that sometimes you write bad articles.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I have the advantage of your bad articles too, because when I'm looking up something, even if the article was terrible, what you end up doing is the comment section, like you said, has a lot of, hey, I tried this and it didn't work, and then you'll update it.
Exactly.
You say, oh, update here, I just updated this thing and now it works, or update, this doesn't work anymore. I think that's important because and it really only works in a few industries. Like Seth Godin doesn't need to go back and update his 4-paragraph article. Like he's just done, right? He just knows what he does, and he gets you a little snackable insight and little inspiration every single day in your inbox. But other things, I think the intent is to be a living, breathing thing, and I think that's you can do both. And actually, they're both very viable and successful. People are successful in doing both of those.
Yeah, and if there was money involved like this, if this was my living, I would obviously have a more rigorous editing procedure. I'm a really lazy editor. I write almost stream of consciousness style, and then I put it out. And what happened before, which was really funny, was that I wrote all these articles about GTM, and I knew that once I click publish, it usually took a day or two for Brian Kuhn, who's the team lead for GTM development, to send me emails saying, okay, here are all the points that you got wrong. And I was like so happy because he was editing my articles for me. Nice. And I owe him so much for being such an open mind and kind of helping me write the content. Obviously, I mean, the GTM team, I think they benefit from the content as well, because it kind of it's like I said, it's a customer support step as well, but also it helps people kind of understand that the wonderful stuff that GTM actually holds beneath the hood. But it was so funny that I could, and I think I got kind of too easy with that, in that I knew that I could write whatever I want, and then the comments will fix it for me. And I tried to take a more rigorous approach to editing, but only like not the most, I think, maybe the most recent article I wrote, which was just a simple script for building a string out of an array. I wrote a script for it, and the script works fine, and it's a good way to do it, but it's not the only way to do it, and it's probably not the most best performance wise. But so there was comments that said that why not do it like this, and then I admitted, that's a good way to do it as well. So it's not like I think the one thing that I've stopped doing is writing code and not testing it, because I did that at one point. I was so confident in my JavaScript skills, and usually it did work, but every now and then there were some really embarrassing mistakes there. But we'll see. It's an if I were to make money out of this, obviously it would be different. I would have a much more rigorous procedure for editing this stuff. But at the moment, it's just another thing that I've chosen not to stress about at all. It's like one of those things I don't see why I should stress about it. That's one of the beauties of not working for compensation in this field.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it's nice that Google's editing it for you, and obviously they see a lot of benefit, because I think to see people are using their product has to be really flattering for them and motivating for them as well. The other thing is you're doing them a service by creating that manual that they don't have to do, which is really nice.
Well, I hope so.
I know we're getting towards the end of our time, but I have to ask, do you do all your graphics yourself?
Yes, the ones that. What have you? Okay, maybe you should finish that with what you're driving for.
No, I'm just.
Yeah, so
just joking.
I have this powerful editing tool called Keynote, and I draw boxes in Keynote, and then I take a screenshot of the box, And in Sketch, I then export it as a PNG and put it on the blog. That's my like graphical editing. It's really advanced. Yeah. I think I'll do a YouTube video of my process at some point because it's really like
this picture of you like with your hand stroking your chin for the GTM tips though. Did you? Yeah. Is that on a webcam or did you have like a lighting? Like, is that professional?
No, I think that's my iPhone in my bedroom.
Nice.
And obviously, I used advanced photo editing tools like the lasso tool and feather. And all this stuff that they teach you after like years and years and years of visual editing with Photoshop.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, to be serious,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I did masks and shit. So I think at some point it just turned into like my own little joke that the graphics are so bad, and I just want to keep on doing. I want them to be so. I want them to be like clip art bad, and I want to like avoid doing any memes. There's memes every now and then, but still.
No, I love it. I mean, you are who you are. Like, you're not trying to be anything that you're not. And I appreciate it because I was sort of making a joke because you just said, I mean, the graphics that you do them yourself, they don't have to be perfect. The posts, you write it and edit it yourself. Sometimes it's not even like you're not even proud of it. All these things, like you're a very like Finnish person, which you've taught me is like very self-deprecating and has humility, which is really cool. But also, like, it's a tremendous success in spite of all those things. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, I'm not trying to point. It actually doesn't have to do with you or your blog. It's more that people are always in the sidelines, like waiting. Like, oh, once I figure out how to do Photoshop, then I can blog. Or once I take this course on JavaScript, then I can write a blog post. Or once I learn how to write, I can do this. Or once I do all these things, there's all these conditions that people. Or once I have time. Once the kids are out of school. Or once summer rolls around and I don't have to do this. Or once I do this, it's like all these different excuses for things to happen, and you just did it.
Yeah, I think part of the philosophy behind it is to just be as true to yourself as you can. I think that's so important. It's a cliche, but if you're a meticulous person, if you're like a really pedantic, then obviously you should edit your images. You should focus on your content. You should do all this stuff because that's you being true to yourself. I've taken the same approach to conference presentations that I never rehearse them because I want the output to be as natural as possible. I want it to be like I'm kind of surprised at what the next slide shows as well as the audience is. So it becomes like a natural dialogue with the audience. And I want them to see that I am not somebody who's like really uptight and like white collar and really rehearsed, like every single punchline is there and every single step is on the right place. I want it to be like my content is. It's just like I'm talking to an empty chair, like I'm just having a dialogue with a friend, not editing myself, not being self-critical, kind of. It's a very Finnish thing to laugh at yourself and make not be afraid to turn yourself into a little joke as long as it's not like insulting or hurting you in any way. So I think that's part of and I think if more people did that, because with some people you can instantly see that they have a front, that they're only doing this persona, they're pretending to be something, and I just don't get the sincerity out of them that I would need when I'm reading something. When I'm using my own time to read content, I want the content to be as fresh and as unadulterated as possible. I want it to be undiluted or whatever.
I love it. You write like the San Antonio Spurs play basketball.
Whoa, take a step back, dude.
And you write like how Biggie raps.
Oh, what the hell? You're going to burn in hell for that. Like San Antonio Spurs plays beautiful, well thought out, completely like Greg Popovich has every single play in his book and he knows how to execute those. There's nothing improvised about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it as an insult. I was trying to make it a compliment. I'm saying that you've learned from your influences. I was trying to draw it all back to your beginning influences and how you sort of represented it. But
you struck out, man.
Take it as a compliment. But yes, maybe it was better in my head than it was on the podcast.
The Biggie one was, I think, if I understood correctly, Biggie was like a huge free flow rapper. Like he had a wonderful improvisational streak.
I love it.
You could half right.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been an amazing. Man, I've had more laughs in this one than we have in a while, and so I'm glad that we got a chance to talk. And absolutely. I know we have to get going, but maybe I think you said you were going to interview me if I ever make it to 100 episodes, so maybe we'll have you back on.
Absolutely. I'll take you up on
awesome,
that.
Man. All right, well, this will be 60, so we're going to be 60 down and 40 more to go before Simo interviews me on the podcast.
Congratulations on the 60 episodes, man.
What a fun story. I can't stop laughing at Simo's Notorious B.I.G. fan site. I think I'm going to name this episode the Notorious Simo in honor of our mutual respect for Biggie Smalls. As I mentioned earlier, Simo and I are in the same cohort of people who decided to start a blog around the same time. We both started by talking about broad topics that we wanted to cover at first, but Simo decided to ride the wave of positive feedback and become a specialist very early along in his process. And it has paid tremendous dividends in traffic, notoriety, and fame in an internet geek sense. Now, my blog has stuck to a variety of topics. We branch into things like email list and email marketing, turn this into a podcast, and sure, those channels combined might reach Simo's blog traffic numbers, but it's clear that focusing on just one area acts as a multiplier over time. Whenever you search for a problem with Google Tag Manager, Simo's blog comes up early and often in the process. The comments section on his website, it's like an old school social network. Instead of chasing after things that he's not, Simo doubles down on what he does best. And that should be a lesson for everybody, perhaps even a lesson for myself. And before I end this podcast, I should also say that Simo makes a mean reindeer carpaccio, some awesome campfire pancakes, and his smoked salmon game is on point. Thanks for the chat, Simo. Let's get you to Minnesota soon so I can show you how much your motherland has influenced my Nordic home state. And maybe we'll even try to find you some decent Mexican food too, although it's pretty tough in Minnesota. For show notes, visit Jeffalytics.com/Simo.